make sure they've actually contributed significantly to that project, because I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that probably say they built something, and like the company that built mine could go out there and say, oh, I helped to get this off the ground. And it's like, well, actually.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Henry Kirk, and I'm a partner over at Studio.init, and I am joined with Jordan Clark from Peak Athletics. Jordan has been very gracious enough, again, to come on and talk with us about his experience working with other developers. And I must say, I really admire your willingness to come on and share your story, because I think it's like really important for folks that are watching that might be thinking of investing in a software project or anything like that. Like, what are some of the, things that worked well for you? What didn't go really well? Were there like any red flags or anything like that you could share? Because, a lot of people tend to, spend a lot of money in development. So why don't you start off and tell us your approach when you were developing Peak Athletics? Where did you find the engineers that you were working with? Share your experience here.
Yeah. Thanks again for letting me come be a guinea pig and talk through some of the pitfalls of building a product, especially for me as a non-technical founder. Some of this stuff has been very difficult. Unfortunately, I have a background with product management, but that doesn't always help you when you're trying to build something technical, especially me working on a mobile app. That's not my background. I've been more on the web development product side. So diving into how I found my developers, when I came up with the idea, I just looked locally, US based, tried to find somebody that could build an MVP. I found someone local within Texas that kind of felt like they understood what I was building, and they made it seem like everything I was talking about, they 100% grasped, knew what to run with, kind of had an idea around like health and fitness. So I felt a little bit of trust there. And I went through probably 3 or 4 different agencies and did some like scoping with them and whatnot. And I landed on this one. They claimed they could have this project done in like 3 months. It ended up, I'll talk through this a little more in a second, but it ended up taking probably 12 months roughly by the time I had something. And that doesn't even mean it was a working project or product. So I kind of kicked it off with them. We had a scope around what we were building. It was a flat fee project, missed every deadline. They used some proprietary software to spin up mobile apps faster. They claimed it was fine. They could migrate everything over at the end of the project seamlessly. That did not pan out either. So it took probably 12 months to get done, where we did the migration. When they migrated everything over to AWS, GitHub, everything broke. So we had all these connections with like Apple Health and Apple Watch, and we were working towards trying to get like a basic machine learning model even rolling. None of that happened. Nothing ever came to fruition. We had bugs all the time. All the communication was via email. The guy didn't really want to talk on the phone. They would ignore me for like 2 weeks at a time. They probably admitted that they underestimated the project. And I like kind of at one point we're like, okay, let's end this flat fee. We'll go hourly. We'll pay you. Like, I get it. Like, you're admitting it and you're in over your head. We'll help financially. And same stuff. Just continued to have missed deadlines. Nothing ever got done. So eventually I got frustrated enough that I kind of was like, hey, we either need to get this out or move on and separate this relationship. So they migrated everything. It broke. They basically disappeared and never helped. Tried to get my money back, or at least scrape some of it back. They threatened to countersue me for going out of scope, but I had everything in email. Just a matter of the fact was I was going to spend probably as much fighting them as I had spent to build what I had already built. So I had to basically cut it as a loss and move on. So I had the code to an extent, had a broken app, and just had to move on and lick my wounds and find another way to get it going. Some red flags, though, that came up early that I probably should have addressed was just the delays and the constant bugs without having a mobile developer on our team. So I have 2 other people on our team, but they're not technical either. I kind of let things slide longer, and my gut told me earlier on, like, this is not right. Like, I need to do something. I should have pulled away sooner, but I didn't, because I didn't have a backup for developing it. But that would be like a major red flag, is if your gut's telling you something's wrong, it probably is. And especially if you let it drag out for months like that. So yeah, if I was redoing it, there's a lot of things I would redo if I was starting from scratch. But if you're not technical, like something feels off, find someone who is technical, and whether you're just paying them to consult, because there's a lot of very tech savvy people that are very bright that might not be able to do the project for you at the cost you're paying for someone to do it, but they will help you for a couple $100 to spend an hour with you. Like Henry, I'm sure you would do that for someone and just
Yeah.
consult. And so it's like reach out, find someone who you can talk through it with that has that technical expertise. Like that's something I wish I would have done sooner, just so I didn't get so far down the road and realize I was right, and then have issues. So that's probably some of the big things around red flags. It's just nothing's ever being delivered and they're missing every deadline and there's tons of bugs, communication's poor. That's pretty standard.
Now was this over? Now the current app that's in the store now, was that the same developer that worked on this?
No. So I am on the third developer. So
Okay.
once we got it kicked over to our stuff, it took me a few months to find someone. I found a referral through someone I knew, had them kind of doing it part time, just paying them another flat fee type project. Someone super experienced too. It was just a matter of they never delivered either. It was like they hardly ever worked on it, didn't really help us. It lagged on for months again. I didn't let this one go as long. So after a couple months, I was like, hey, are you going to have time to do this or not? He said yes. I gave it another couple weeks, nothing came. And I was like, hey, I got to end this. And I was out with a couple $1,000. I didn't pay the full fee. It was kind of, we had an agreement that we do half up front, half at the end, and moved on. And then I waited. It took me several months going back and forth, trying to figure out what to do. Did a Hail Mary. Was like, I'm going to go overseas this time. Because, I mean, as we know, it's the hourly rate is cheaper. Not always a good thing, but honestly, the development agency I found, I went on Upwork, found several agencies, reached out to founders that had used some of them, and landed on one that all they did was mobile development. They were go with Swift. So they got it back up and running. It wasn't until this past February that we finally got it running properly again. So to them, like they did a great job of getting it back up and in the store, getting us users, getting us revenue. So there have been limitations around functionalities that they can build, understanding what we're trying to build and progressing forward. So we've hit a wall with that where they can't quite build it to the next step, but honestly, they got it running. So I'm grateful that even came about, because like I said, it was a Hail Mary. I was either it was going to work or I was just going to get rid of it. After a while, it's like you start questioning why what you're doing. Is there something else you should be focusing on? So
interesting. So what you're saying with them is like they were pretty good to kind of like clean it up and get it launched, but when you're trying to iterate and build on the product itself, they're struggling to kind of, what is it? You think it's a language barrier or do you think it's a skill issue?
I would say some of it's a language barrier and some of it's an industry, like the vertical we're building in probably isn't as common to their developers. So like them understanding the little nuances around like athlete training and those types of things, like they don't quite understand it. And it's hard to get them to wrap their head around that type of stuff. So it could be that, could be some of it's just limitations. I mean, we had some issues with trying to change pricing and using revenue cat, and they just couldn't figure some of it out, and we had to move on. So it's probably 90% they could do. It's just kind of a barrier of understanding what we're building. But like I said, they got us back up and running. That's what we needed at the time. Now we have different needs, and we haven't really been able to touch like design and kind of progressing the product further. So trying to get to that customization, personalization phase where we know we need to be to really grow has been tough because we're just now getting where, okay, that's our next phase is clean up stuff. And I mean, a lot of this stuff you guys gave us feedback on in the app teardown, like that's things we haven't been able to touch around design and user flow and whatnot. So
interesting. So do you think that like hiring in any of the developers that you have, like, especially this current one that you're working with, like, do you find simple tasks may take 2 to 3 times as long for them to do? Like where, let's say they're a pretty inexpensive rate, but if you found that like you're still spending what you thought someone that might have been faster, more local then compared to your other two developers. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you're saying
Yeah,
that they struggle with revenue cat. So if they're like $40 an hour, are you still spending about 100 an hour roughly to deliver the same thing that maybe someone locally would be?
it's odd because it's probably some things they can do, like the basic things they could probably do quickly and not a big deal. But yeah, to your point, when you start to look at things around like back end tasks or dealing with AWS or revenue cat, yeah, you're probably spending as much. You're probably spending $100 to 150 an hour what you would pay someone that's more experienced here in the U.S. So yeah, it just varies. So it's odd. They can do some things super fast and like get it done quickly and it's easy. And then others, like we're just talking about with revenue cat, I ended up spending probably 10 hours of them trying to figure stuff out and it got nowhere. And it's like, okay, we just need to move on and we'll figure it out later. So
if you don't mind sharing, how much are you in engineering wise for the project so far?
we'll probably all in just on the engineering, probably about 40.
Wow. Wow.
So
Interesting. That's a lot of money. So what other, in kind of closing, like wrapping this thing, like what would be some of the advice that you would have, for others out there that are looking to get started, given that you've been through, it sounds like you've done the whole gambit of it. You've done the overseas, you've done the Upwork, you've done some local people, you've done through referrals too, which sounds like this person was moonlighting, that like to do that, like you've had the full spectrum. So what would you kind of, if you're interviewing another developer in the future, what advice would you have for someone that's watching this?
yeah, well, I would probably try to find someone technical that can be, whether if they don't, even if they don't have the expertise in the area, if they're more technical, maybe they understand some back end stuff or even web development. Use them as a consultant, bring them in to help interview some of these engineers because you're not going to always know the proper questions. And maybe they don't know the actual code base you're going to build it on, that person you want to use as a consultant, but they know enough about overarching architecture, the right questions to ask, and see if this engineer has the expertise and can build what you need them to, or if they're just giving you the runaround. Because if you're not technical, you could easily be persuaded to think that the person on the other end knows exactly what they're talking about without ever having built something in that same vertical, or they're just BSing you and you won't know because it's easy to sound smart and say the right words. But sometimes someone that's at the same level, then even if it's on a different side of the technical aspect, can probably catch it and be like, that's probably not right. So I would lean on someone to pay to have as a consultant. It's probably worth the money, I would assume. So not assume, it would be. Yeah, I would definitely do that. And then just make sure, reach out to people they've done projects with in the past. Don't just rely on what they show on their website or what their portfolio says. Like make sure they've actually contributed significantly to that project, because I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that probably say they built something, and like the company that built mine could go out there and say, oh, I helped you get this off the ground. It's like, well, actually you did it, but it's in the app store now, and they could go look at it and be like, okay, that's a successful app they built. Yeah, those are the things I would look for. I mean, if in the perfect world, if you're not technical, you would find someone technical to bring as a co-founder. I think it's worth the equity to have that person on your side, because it's tough go if you're a non-technical founder trying to build something technical and something breaks, you can't jump in and fix it.
I really, truly appreciate you taking the time and being willing to share your story.
You're welcome. And I am open about it because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are hiding, thinking they're alone, that this is only happening to them. But as you and I have kind of talked, there's a lot of us that have gone through this, and we don't be transparent about it. We'll all think that we failed on our own, and it's happening to a lot of people. So I just want to share that so other founders realize they're not in this alone. Like a lot of people have gone through this, and I'm happy to share this with you as well.